in Bigfoot's snow trap. The deep forest in northern Montana seemed carved out of a winter fairy tale. The pines were strewn with snow. They stood like silent sentinels. The branches muffled every sound, creating an unnatural silence. The air was so clear that every breath left an icy aftertaste on my lips. The snow on the ground lay like a snow-white carpet with no footprints on it. No human footprints, no animal tracks. Only occasionally the silence was broken by the lonely cry of a raven echoing between the trees. Distant, alarming, as if warning. The 5 friends, Jake, Chris, Sarah, Mark, and Emily, were walking down the narrow trail, knee-deep in snow. Their breath was blowing in the frosty air, and their cheeks were burning from the cold. They laughed and joked, unaware that with each step, the forest around them was growing quieter. "It's beautiful here," Chris muttered, looking out over the snowy expanse. "Yeah, but it's too quiet," Jake frowned. He was an experienced hunter. His fingers clenched the grip of his rifle involuntarily. He was the first to notice that something was wrong. No sign of hares, no squirrels, not even bird wings in the snow. It was as if all life had left the area, or the animals had gone into hiding. "Is there a bear around?" Sarah asked in a whisper. Jake shook his head. Bears hibernate in winter, and even if they woke up, they wouldn't silence the whole forest like that. After walking a couple more miles, the friends calmed down and began to get used to this silence. When evening came, they reached the foot of the mountain. They put up their tents and lit a fire. The camp was set up in a small hollow, protected from the wind by tall pines. The fire crackled, casting orange glare on the icy tents. Smoke was wafting above the flames of the fire, which dissolved into the darkening sky. "It's freezing today." Chris rubbed his hands together, moving closer to the fire. His breath was turning into white clouds and his cheeks were red from the cold. However, the silence. No cars, no people, no one. Sarah smiled, pouring herself a hot cup of coffee. "Exactly, it's too quiet," Jake muttered, setting his mug aside. He was sitting a little ways away, his back to the dark woods. Jake kept turning around, peering into the darkness of the forest. "That hunting paranoia of yours," Mark laughed. "Maybe it's the cold," Emily said, and turned toward the woods. "The animals are used to the cold. It's something else," Jake whispered quietly. The wind suddenly died down. Even the fire was quiet, and only the crackling of embers sounded unnaturally loud. And then they heard it. The quiet crunch of snow. Not a step, not a branch. However, something large, carefully shifting its weight from one foot to the other. "Shh," Jake said loudly. Chris turned around, still smiling. There was a loud crack. A branch snapped 10 feet away from them. In the darkness of the forest, someone was moving. A moment later, something jumped out from behind a pine tree, black, shaggy, and very tall. It moved quickly and silently, like a ghost, despite its size. "What is that?" Chris didn't even have time to jump up. A clawed paw dug into his shoulder, piercing his clothes like paper. The creature swung its paw, and Chris flew into the air like a rag doll. Chris fell to the snow and never moved again. Jake held the gun, but he didn't even have time to aim. The creature darted away, blending into the shadows of the trees. Only yellow eyes glinted in the darkness like a wolf's. "Bigfoot! It's a Bigfoot!" Jake roared, firing at random. The rumble of a shot broke the silence, but he was gone. Only wide footprints, each with a claw print, led off into the forest. Mark stood in shock and didn't move. Emily gasped, unable to take her eyes off the spot where their friend had been laughing a moment ago. And the forest around them fell silent again. It was too quiet again. Chris lay beside the fire, motionless. Everyone realized that he would never get up again. In an instant, they realized what was happening. Panic seized them, and they ran in different directions. Emily was the first to rush, her legs carrying her away from the fire. She ran toward the river, visible through the trees. Water will hide my scent, she thought. Sarah's scream sounded behind her. She looked back. Between the trunks, 20 feet behind her, she saw 2 yellow dots, monster eyes that burned like lanterns. They weren't blinking, they weren't coming closer. They were just watching her. Mark ran the other way. He climbed a tree. His fingers gripped the bark of the pine. His feet slipped on the icy limbs. Higher! Higher! He heard in his head. He froze at 15 feet, clinging to the trunk like a child to its mother. Silence, then a rustle under the tree, and a strange breathing. It was deep, hoarse, as if his lungs were full of fluid. The odor rose upward and reached Mark. The smell was nasty, like wet animal fur. Mark pressed himself harder against the tree, and at that moment a branch cracked beneath him. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, feeling the tree sway slightly as if something large had leaned against the trunk. Suddenly, however, the foul odor disappeared, and he looked down, but there was no one there. Mark tried to climb even higher up the tree. Jake was running, falling knee-deep in the snow. In one hand, he held a shotgun. His other hand was clutching Sarah's arm, who was running with him. Don't look back. Let's run to the big rocks. He felt that. It was following them. Not seen, not heard, but its presence was felt. After 100 feet, it caught up with them. From behind the trunk of a big old pine tree, a huge shadow jumped out. A paw swung and slammed into Jake's chest. His ribs cracked. He flew backward, fell into the snow, and coughed up blood. Jake! Sarah screamed, but her feet were already carrying her away. The deep snow traitorously slowed every step. Sarah stumbled, fell face first into the snow, and couldn't get up. And Jake, bleeding, saw the huge silhouette straighten to its full height over his girlfriend. It grabbed Sarah and dragged her into the forest. The forest fell silent again. Meanwhile, Emily ran along the river until she came upon a stone cave. The cave was shallow, but deep enough to hide in. Emily pressed herself into the stone wall, trying not to breathe. She clutched her hunting knife in her hands, a pitiful weapon against whatever was hunting them. Jake crawled through the snow, leaving a red trail behind him. Every breath came with difficulty. He'd accidentally found someone's old trap. Rusty teeth protruded from the snow. An old trap. Something, at least. He mumbled hoarsely, pulling off his jacket. He made a torch. Jake wrapped a cloth around a branch, lit it with trembling hands, and stuck it in the snow in front of the trap. Bait. It should work for this monster, Jake thought. He himself hid behind a tree, loading the last cartridge. Go, come here. Come here for the bait, thought Jake. The forest fell silent. Then, there was a crunch of twigs. It came out of the thicket slowly, peering curiously at the fire. 12 to 15 feet tall, wool slick with blood, eyes as yellow as an owl's. Jake fired. The bullet hit it in the chest. The beast roared, grabbed at the wound, swatted the bullet away like a splinter. Then, it came toward Jake. It stepped forward, its paw caught in the trap. But it didn't work. Jake tried to get up, but his legs wouldn't budge. Well, he whispered, looking into the yellow eyes. The last thing he saw was the claws over his face. Mark heard Jake scream, and a second later, a loud roar. It echoed through the forest, making the trees shudder. Then silence. Emily sat in the cave, clutching the knife, realizing it was her turn. Her palm, wet with sweat, slid down the hilt of the knife. She didn't realize how long she had been in that cave. She had lost track of time. Mark had been up all night, clutching at a branch, afraid to move. We're all going to be killed, he thought, and for the first time in his life, he cried. When dawn broke, Mark cautiously climbed down. The snow was pink, but not from the dawn. He found Sarah about 100 feet from the camp. Or rather, what was left of her. Her jacket was torn like paper. The bones were sticking out, white and clean, as if they'd been neatly licked. Emily saw the light at the entrance to the cave and realized it was morning. She decided to get out and walk towards the camp. She walked along the freezing river, moving only because of her instinct for self-preservation. Her fingers were blue from the cold, her face covered with scratches from branches. Her gaze was as blank as a winter sky. Suddenly, there was a rustle in the bushes. She froze, clutching the knife in her stiffened fingers. Mark emerged from the trees. His lips were chapped from the frost, and his eyes were red, not from the cold, but from tears. He stepped toward Emily, stumbled, and fell into the snow in front of her. "You're alive." His voice sounded hoarse, like he hadn't had a drink of water in a week. Emily stared at him. "Where are the others?" she asked, even though she could see it in his face. Mark shook his head silently. They walked for a long time through the snowy forest, trying to get as far away as possible from this place where everything happened. It took 4 hours for the rescuers to find them. A helicopter with a red cross landed in a snowy clearing. "Oh my God, they're alive!" screamed one of the rangers. Emily and Mark were wrapped in thermal blankets, given hot tea. "What happened? Where are your friends?" asked a gray-haired ranger with a sheriff's badge. It killed them," Emily whispered. "A bear. Nonbada. It was, bigger. It walked on 2 legs." The rangers looked at each other. "Contusion, hypothermia, shock," said one of them, making a note in his notebook. The next day, a search party found the camp. Scattered belongings, an extinguished campfire, and bloodstains, already covered with fresh snow. "A bear and her brood, it must be," the young ranger muttered. However, his partner, an old ranger with a wrinkled face, was silent. He stared at the tracks leading into the thicket, too big, too deep, and too human-like, but not quite. "Let's off the search," the old forester said suddenly. "Wrap it up. There's no one else here," he repeated. He took one last look toward the forest, where the shadows between the trees seemed too thick, and crossed himself quickly. Emily and Mark were taken to the hospital. Their stories were deemed hallucinations from hypothermia. The official version read, "A rogue bear attack." When Emily woke up in a sweat at night, she dreamed of yellow eyes in the darkness, and Mark, even years later, couldn't bring himself to enter the woods. Because sometimes darkness must remain darkness, and what lurks in it is best left undisturbed.